Today I'm going to be taking a look at combat with Fantasy Grounds using the 5e 2024 rule set. Combat does vary a little bit between rule sets. It's a little bit different because the character sheets are laid out different. Some of the rules mechanics are different, and some of the creatures and the different types of attacks and spells. But generally, Fantasy Grounds kind of handles combat in a similar way. It's either drag and drop, or you can target, or you can use the NPC sheets and attack from there. So it kind of depends on who developed the rule set and how the rules were formulated. So what we're going to do first is let's talk about the setup. So I have two views here. I have the GM view and the player view. So the Game Master view is where essentially I'm going to get all set up before the players log in. So there are some options that you can have for the players and for the gameplay in the 5e rule set. These options vary between different rule sets and different versions, so bear with me on that. But essentially, I've set all the parameters that I prefer for my sessions. This will take a little time to digest how these impact your game and what they actually do. So I don't have a lot of time to cover this, but I want to go ahead and just say that you have different options. So for example, on combat, if you miss your target, you can remove on miss, or you can have it to where it's going to turn off, so you won't do that at all, or for multi-targeting. So that's an option that you may employ during the game. If you're going to play face-to-face, they have a manual dice entry option. When you take your turn, that changes the behavior of how the token is selected from the combat tracker. So when you're first starting to set up for your game, you want to have your players on the combat tracker. So I'm just going to assume that these two players are part of my campaign. They haven't logged in yet, so let's go ahead and do that. So I'm playing a localized game, so I don't have to go to the internet necessarily because I'm just doing everything on my computer. So there's two ways to connect. So I'm going to click on Join Campaign. And what you want to do here is we don't need to join a cloud game, but we would want to join via the local host. So I'm going to type localhost where it says join by IP and port. So if you're connecting to yourself, or you're plugged in the same network, you can do this depending on how your router and your networking is set up, but localhost, and it's always on port 1802. So I'm going to go ahead and hit start in this case. But if you were a player, sometimes you'll connect via the lobby. I can connect through the lobby, but it's kind of redundant because I'm connecting to myself on my own computer. It's not a different computer. It's not like Wi-Fi or anything like that. So I'm going to go just direct. So that's why I have localhost here. So I'm going to go ahead and hit start. And it failed because I didn't have the password. Hopefully I did this right. Was it Dragon? I hope so. I usually give it some pretty simple passwords. I don't know why I password protected it, but it's just a habit I have. So that's a kind of an important thing if you're going to do a cloud game, is you want to make sure that the game is password protected. And this is normal behavior if your players haven't connected yet. It'll acquire the file list. So anything that's shared with the players and any maps that are out and about, this will help to bring in the cache files and download the settings and that sort of thing. So the host view controls all of that. So once this is getting loaded, I'm going to select characters. So generally speaking, depending on how much content is shared with the players and the type of rule set and such, this may take a couple minutes, depending on how far you are away from your players, how strong their internet is, all those kinds of things. There's lots of factors for connecting, and if they can't connect, it usually means their connection's blocked, or they have an antivirus thing going on that thinks Fantasy Grounds is a threat. You have firewalls on a lot of computer networks that protect the computer from invasive IP addresses and for flood controls. So there's all kinds of reasons why that happens. It's not just a Fantasy Grounds thing. It's kind of more to do with networking. Okay, so this is the campaign setup. I don't really need to worry about this as much as a player, but these two windows usually pop up initially the first time. So I'm going to click on the show on load. I'm going to uncheck that. So as a player, I don't want this to pop up every single time I connect. I'm going to go ahead and hit next. And any rules that were shared by the game master to me, I can load those. So I'm just going to go ahead and load the 2024 core rules. And anything that's available for me as a player will load here. Now, if there's additional modules, your GM can tell you that. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. And I'm going to hit next. And I don't normally have to fiddle around with options after the first go around, but I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And right now, my active player is black, so I'm going to go ahead and choose like a light blue color. As the game master, I have it set to like a yellow color. Anything like on here, like dice, token, center, select, I'm going to have it on center. So it's going to move the map to where my token is. And that's helpful if you've got a large map and you're really far apart. That helps you from having to scroll back and forth so much. But as the game master, I actually have that turned off. So if I go into options for the game master, this is basically something that kind of irritates me. So I don't even want it to select token. I'm just going to turn it off. So this way the map doesn't move. So once I have it set in place, I don't want the map moving all over the place unless you got a really giant map that you're using. But in most cases, as the game master, I'll move the map where I want it. I don't want Fantasy Grounds to do that for me. But as a player, I can leave it on center. So if I'm like dilly-dallying with the map and I move my token way over here and I get lost or whatever, when my turn comes up, it will reshift the map and recenter it on the player. So that's kind of helpful to know that. Also, as a player, once this map is shared, it will pop up and they'll have to locate it where they want it. Bear with me, I'm kind of limited on space, so I'm going to collapse this right-hand side because once I do my player selection, I don't really need that too much unless I'm going to switch spells or level up or something like that. So I'm going to go ahead and collapse this as far as it'll go. That way I don't waste all the room. And then I'm going to look at these options. I really don't need to mess with any of these. So other than that, I'm just going to be basically closing this down and calling it good. And then that's basically all the things I have to worry about or even consider as a player. I don't have to mess with that too much. Just change the color of my selection color and then maybe an option or two depending on what your GM tells you. So I go ahead and hit finish. These are the player characters that are available for me as a player. So these are already in the system built. So if your GM has pre-gens or such, they can use this to consider for players if they don't want to spend an hour or two building characters. Or at this point, I would load up the books that I need and start building a character or leveling up. When I'm done leveling up, I'll go to my, into your library for your books. So if you go to library and you go to books, I just have the Bastions book loaded from the Dungeon Master's Guide. So if that's an option your GM is enabled, that'll be available to me. And then here's the Player's Handbook. That's pretty much all I'll need throughout a majority, like 90% of the adventure. That's probably what I'll need. There might be another book or perhaps two books that you've dragged over some options that are like subclasses, maybe some unique spells and items. Once in a while you'll need another book to active, but in most cases you just need the Player's Handbook or the core rule book of the rule set that you're in. So this is essentially the player's view, and you can look through, you can search, that sort of thing. But anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and select a character. Let's see, I have Braylum Silvertongue and Doric Rockfist. I'm going to use the cleric since it has more options, so I can show you that. So if I click on this, that's going to basically claim that character, and now my character is up here to be viewed. And then anything else on the combat tracker, if I switch it to the tabletop list, or the combat tabletop list, you have two options as to how you want to view these. So then this is now my character sheet. This other character is GM controlled or controlled by another player. So normally what I do as a player is I will space this character sheet out where I can actually have some room. So if you have these across by 8 characters, you might have to bring this down a little bit. And then I'll take the bottom of this and kind of shrink it a little. I don't need that much length on it. And that's about where I would set that. And then as a kind of like a formality or something I do all the time as a player, just to make life easier on me, especially if you're new, is the initiative roll here is on the front page. So a lot of times you're going to spend most of your time on the combat tracker. So what I'll do is I'll go to the main page, I'll drag and drop the initiative, because if I double click on this now, it will roll my initiative for me, and then it'll record it onto the combat tracker. However, I don't necessarily want to keep having to come to this page every time I need to roll initiative. So what I'm going to do is take this die and drag and drop it into the dice, or into this shortcut keys. Now I can roll from there. Just single click and it will roll and record the initiative there. So that's one thing I do as a player to save myself a little bit of heartache. Now when the turns are passed in the combat tracker, so for instance on the GM side, I'm going to select here's Dorig, it's his turn. When he's done with his turn, he'll want to advance the combat tracker, and that's something that people forget quite a bit, especially when you're new and you're not used to it. So I'm going to unlock this a little bit and kind of size it, right click, lock position, and then I need to get the combat tracker up because I don't have it up just yet. So I'll go like that, and then see it's on my turn right now. So what you want to do is click on next actor. So this will help advance the turn to the next player. So rather than having to reach up here and find this every time, I will left click and drag this down to the hotkeys. So now I have my initiative roll and the advanced turn on the shortcut keys. It's pretty simple as a player. One thing to keep in mind, if you drag a roll such as initiative down here into your hotkeys, if your dexterity changes or you have a magic item that boosts your dex or your initiative, you'll have to re-drag the initiative roll or come up with or just remember to do it manually. So this does not change. So once I drag this over to the hotkeys, that won't change. This is a static number at this point. It won't update with the character. So if you use shortcuts for dice rolls, especially for like skill checks, initiative rolls, you'll want to re-drag them if you level up or something changes on your character sheet. So that's something that you'll have to remember. I recall the first time I did that, I left my initiative roll down there, and the whole time I was playing, I was wondering why my initiative roll sucked. Well, I never updated it, and I was already at level 5 by the time I realized that was an expired link, essentially. It was still using my first level settings, and I had adjusted my dex where it would give me an additional +1. So you got to kind of something to manage occasionally, and that you won't know that from the get-go. But if you're an experienced GM, make sure your players know that they need to refresh these sometimes, depending on what's going on in your game and when they level up, that sort of thing. All right, so generally speaking, though, these are the two shortcuts that I have all the time, regardless of what game I'm playing, and the mechanics, of course. I go to my skill checks. I don't normally shortcut all of these. I just shortcut the ones I think I need the most. So medicine is probably one I'll use quite a bit as a healer. So I'm going to left click and drag the dice into the slot. And then there is perception, which GMs quite often use and abuse quite a bit. So I will left click and drag this down. So left click is left click and hold with the mouse and drag it down. So those are the two main ones, and I might pick one other. So there's history, insight. Those are kind of situational at best, so I'll just leave those. But I think my medicine and my perception is probably the most common. So I only put like maybe 2 or 3 down here. You don't need to do all of them. But I do this as a convenience for myself and for the GM, so I don't have to keep looking for this stuff every time I need to roll something. And then I'm going to go to the actions tab because that's where the magic happens. So I have my crossbow, I have an unarmed strike up here, and a warhammer. Right now the warhammer is set to single-handed, which is your primary hand, which will give you the damage bonus. But if you change it to two hands, you want to unequip in your inventory. You have to unequip your shield. You're not really supposed to have the armor class bonus if you're using two hands. You're not using your shield. But a lot of people forget that. So I made a, let's see, did I create that? I might have made, yeah, shield drop. So I made an effect here that I can apply to myself so that if it, in the occasion I have to use, and that's spelled wrong, S-H, shield. There we go. Shield drop. Shielded drop. Okay. So this is just an effect that I put -2 armor class on. So this way, when the player is playing, they don't have to go and mess around with their inventory. They can just take this -2 and it just cancels out their shield bonus. The only problem with that is it doesn't account for the weight. So unless you unequip it, it's not going to take away the weight of the shield, but 99% of the time that doesn't really matter. But when you're teetering on encumbrance and such, if you're really a stickler about weight and carrying capacity, that might come into play, but in most cases not. So this is the combat tracker, and I have this mode selected to combat. If you need to make any adjustments or changes to this before you play, you want to make sure it's unlocked and talk to your game master about that. But once you're done, you can lock this, and this is kind of how you want it to look like before you start playing. So you have all of your spells set up. You have I made this manually, just kind of created a list so I can keep track of my inventory. There is an extension that kind of ties this in with your inventory, but this is more of a manual thing that I do for myself. And it doesn't update this actual inventory number. So if I use candles on that combat tracker, it doesn't deduct the candles from here unless you get an extension. So that's just a manual process, and I don't really, as a game master, I don't enforce that a lot. But sometimes, if I feel like they're abusing it, I'll take and ask them to remove them from their inventory. But generally speaking, like rations and water, they're constantly replacing those or having access to them, so I don't worry too much. But as a player, I'll check these off as I use them, and then I might, as a good player, I might mention that I'm running out of food and water, or we need to go look for water or something like that. I think it adds more immersion. So there's some things here. So here's an effect that's really just a note. So this is Tavern Brawler. You get a bonus action for grappling, and it's set to self. So I would set this before the game starts as a reminder. So I'll click on the effect, and it will add it to the combat tracker. It doesn't do anything mechanically in this case, but when my turn comes up, I can remember that I have this action, this grappling action. So that's nice to have. And then for the dwarven things, the things that are related to a dwarf, I have Dwarven Resilience, so this one gives you resist poison, and then you get advantage on saving throws versus poison. That's still a manual process, so it's kind of half automated, but I'm going to go ahead and click that. There we go. So there's two effects on here. One is more of a note, and one is kind of a resist poison, and then advantage on save type poison. So I don't know if this actually works, but if you have an extension that has more functionality, it probably would. So sometimes you'll have to remember, if you don't have automation set up or extensions, that you get advantage on your saving throw versus poison. So you just have to click advantage before you roll. The GM would, because they're going to make that save. All right, so the next thing is we have a couple abilities here. So we have Preserve Life, and then we have Channel Divinity, which is Turn Undead. So this is a Cleric of Life, the life domain. So this is the cast roll, which is a saving throw against undead. And then if they are turned, then you would apply this effect, which is turn undead turned. So that just is kind of like a tag, and I think they just are supposed to just move away from you unless they get attacked. So, and then here's all the spells, cantrips, the first level spells, second level spells, and then here's some standard actions in case I need these. So the standard actions were added manually. These are kind of like effects that can help you during combat, so you don't have to push as many buttons after, or at least it helps keep track of some of the things you can do in your round. So you can dodge, help, hide, and ready a spell, or just ready weapons if you want, and then the shield drop that I added myself. So this is the character sheet. 90% of the time you're going to be spending your days on this sheet itself. When you want to make changes and stuff, you have to unlock it and talk to your game master and swap out spells, do that sort of thing. If you switch to standard mode, you can update these categories like dwarf, feats, items, spells. You can do that, or if you need to add another one, you could do that. Generally, spells are automatically added, but any of this automation stuff may or may not be added depending on how well developed and how defined the rule set is. So I'm going to go to preparation mode. So this is where you can set how many uses you have. So in this case, for the candles, the rations, and the water skin, I just have 10, 5, and 1. So 1 per day, 5 per day, and 10 per day for candles. So, and it's set to 1, so they don't recharge. And then most of these don't need a recharge value except for Channel Divinity. You only get to use one of these, so when I'm done using one of them, I'll basically have to mentally remember that until you rest. And then these down here are daily. These don't have an expiration, but you could set it to expire in your next roll, that sort of thing. So some of these have expirations. And then for your spells, you have these little bubbles here to prepare your spells. So if you had a whole bunch of spells here, you can add more, and then you click this little bubble to prepare them. So that way, when you actually switch to combat, they'll show up here as prepared and not just part of a list of spells. So now I'm in combat mode, and I'm going to lock the character sheet, and that's where I want to be as a player. So as the GM, once the players are set up, and they've got their character sheets, and you've gone over all this stuff with them, you have to remind them. Sometimes people forget from week to week, or if you only play once a month, it's really hard to remember sometimes. So one of the biggest challenges of using Fantasy Grounds or any virtual tabletop is the ability to use it. If you don't use it, you lose it. I mean, I don't play as often as I did, and I forget a lot of stuff. So the biggest tip I can give anyone that's using Fantasy Grounds is to use it. There's people that will play for like 20 minutes. Oh, this sucks, and then they just don't play anymore. So you really do have to use it to get familiar with it and to realize the power of it and the utility. A lot of times, I don't think people have patience for that. I think they kind of get used to video games or instant satisfaction. And you got to remember, this is a role-playing game, tabletop role-playing game. So if you don't get that immediate satisfaction, it's not really how this thing was designed. It was more to emulate playing on a table. I mean, there's a little bit of video game to it, but in most cases, it's kind of manual, taking turns, reading, looking up stuff, doing dice rolls, almost everything you do at a table. This just makes it a little bit more organized and a little bit more convenient once you get used to it and you develop your own feng shui or your own way of doing things. So this is how I would do it as a player. This is how I set up my table. Every time I'll put the character sheet over here if I have room, and then I will basically lay it out so I can see everything on the combat tracker. Occasionally I'll have to tab to my abilities area, sometimes an inventory to manage that or keep track of my treasure. Sometimes I'll have an odd skill or a skill that I'm not necessarily proficient in, but I need to make a check. So like I said, I shortcutted those at the bottom. And then sometimes I come to the main page, like if you need to make a strength check or saves over here on the right. And then, of course, you have your description of your background, species, and class. So sometimes you got to read those. I would, as a spellcaster especially, is click on this little gear, and then for the cleric, click on the cleric, and you'll want to hopefully, oh, so these were built with a different legacy thing, so that's why it's not popping up. But I would shortcut your cleric class into one of your things down here, and that in your shortcut slots, and then that way you could pop it up if you need to read something, especially when it comes time to leveling up or building characters. All right, so this is done. Don't have to worry about that so much anymore, and this is ready to go. So as the game master, I'm going to pop up the map. So this is the story entry, and then there's the actual book. Here's the this is a dice shortcut that I have here, and then the story entry actually has, yeah, so these are the fancy dice, and I have the Dragon Queen dice with effects on it. That comes as a bonus with the Dragon Delves. So what I want to do is open up the story entry. This is a place where the players are actually just entering. So I'm going to open up the map, which is what I have set up here, and click on this L1, which is the story entry that I just had up, and read this off. So I'm kind of limited on space. Normally I'd have more room, but since I have this divided in half. So this is the Game Master's view on the left. So I'm going to send this chat over to this to the chat for the players. So if I click on this little bubble, this is narration. So it says the tunnel from above leads into a dank, sprawling cavern walled with dirt and twisting roots. Enormous claw marks mar the walls. So this is something you could read aloud, or your players can. And then you have an encounter here that comes in L1, so in this area. And I imagine that this area here is where the, I wouldn't say bad guys, but where the NPCs are. They do attack, I believe, if I read that right. And if I click on zoom to fit, that will help reduce the map and make it so I can see the entire map. But when you're kind of focused on one area, you can click on the map and then just zoom in with the mouse wheel if you have a mouse wheel. And that will help kind of focus the area that you're working in. And then for a starting location, as the game master, I would put the players on the map before they connect to the table once their characters are built. So I'll take this little token here, left click and drag, put that on the map, and then I'll do the same thing for this other NPC. Actually, I'm just going to get rid of that. Close. I'm going to actually, oops, I didn't mean to do that. Combat tracker, I actually want to get rid of this guy here. Delete item. Okay, I just want to have one character on here. Alright, so this is, and then there's a parcel, like some loot. So if they complete this, or they have time and they find this acid vial, you can add that to the party sheet. So that's another step in the beginning. As the game master, you want to get your party sheet set up also before you really start playing. So I'd put Doragon here, and that way it makes it easier for me to award experience points, loot, treasure, that sort of thing. So that's with the party sheet, and you get the overview of the whole group. So now that I have that set up, here's Bralem here. He's on the map. We might get a turn first, we'll see. And then the encounter itself is a group of elves that are protecting this cave. They're already placed on the map. That's what these checks are. So if I click on this little arrow that points up, it says add to combat tracker. So I'll click on that, and when I do that, they'll be added here. But as you see, the player doesn't see that yet. So this is just kind of part of the setup. And they're over here in this camp, camping out, as I suspected. So this is kind of how you're going to run this, is when you want to be at this particular type of setup or point before the game starts. You want to be right here. And when the players join the table, they'll claim their characters. You can lock the tokens. So you can make it so like the tokens are locked with these options up here on this toolbar. So if you unlock this, you have more options. So the players don't see any of these labels that I have here. So if you want the players to see the map, once you have it all set up, you can right click on the image, go to sharing, and you'll share the record. And it will eventually pop up over here. So as you can see, this is now the player's view. So technically they don't see these guys yet because you're kind of getting set up, and it's basically just the beginning of getting this thing going. So he's on the map right now, and if he moves the token, I can approve it, and then you can see it counts how far he's moved. So these are waypoints. And it looks like it didn't accept my color change that I had set up because I want it to be light blue. So I'm going to go back into the options. Yeah, see, it's still black. I didn't confirm it. That's what happened. So I'm going to make it a light blue and hit OK. So now I have this kind of light blue color for my indicator. So this is, if you wanted to let this guy move on this side of it, you can accept it or cancel. So I'm going to hit cancel all. I'm going to say, no, not yet. We're not quite ready to play yet. But as you can see, they don't see the NPCs, they don't see the labels. So these are hidden in the layers here. So the newer adventures will have that. They'll have a hidden layer for effects. They'll have a hidden layer for sometimes for NPCs are hidden in the combat tracker, and then they're hidden by this little toggle here that says GM only. So that's just something you'll learn as you play Fantasy Grounds, like how to manage the map and such. Now this already has all the line of sight on there, but yesterday when I was doing a preview for Dragon Delves, I had found better maps. I would say better meaning more virtual tabletop friendly. This one isn't bad, but you'll find in other adventures that the maps just aren't quite there. And when you zoom in, a lot of times these things don't look so great because the files are compressed. They're made a little bit smaller and that sort of thing. But nonetheless, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say, okay, you guys, we're going to roll initiative. So even though he already has initiative, I'm going to give him an opportunity to roll. So as the player on this side here, I'm going to open up his character sheet. If I double click on the token, it will bring up the last map that you were on. So if you accidentally close this as a player and you double click on your token in the combat tracker, it'll bring the map up. And then on the character sheet here, there's all that, but I'm going to make sure this is on the actions tab. So it's my turn. I'm going to roll initiative since it's the first round. We haven't really done anything yet. So in doing that, I'll use my shortcut down here. So single click, and there it goes. So this dice down here, you notice, isn't the same as the Game Master. So this is the default color for the dice. If I, as a player, and I don't have my own dice, I can still go in and select a different color. So you have some options as a player, not many, but you have some. If you want all the fancy ones, you'll have to buy the dice separately. So that's one thing that the players have to. I guess since I'm the host, I can use those. But generally speaking, for the elemental basics, I guess I'm going to use that one, or maybe that, or maybe this one. So there we go. So now I have my own dice as a player. So next time if I roll initiative, it should roll this dice down here instead. So this is like an ice set, it looks like, or frost or water or something like that. So okay, so now that that's happened, I'm going to, as a GM, I'm going to check this out. So hiding in an alcove along the northwest wall. So we're talking about these guys. There are 4 elves, medium guards, basically their stat blocks, from Redwood Watch. There's Darren, Jairus, Lyrian, and Reyna. The L's are hostile towards the characters as soon as the characters venture more than 10 feet into this area. So I think he's definitely 10 feet in. Let's see. The L's begin combat screaming at the characters to leave and never return. So that's kind of the way this thing's set up. So it looks kind of hostile. So I'm going to go ahead and place them onto the map now at this point. So I'm going to say you hear some rummaging going on over here on your right hand side. Along there's like an alcove. So once that happens, you can click up here to show all the NPCs at once, or you can click individually. So I might just click on a couple of these, and as the player, or I can click on all of them. As a player, they'll start showing up over here and on the map. So they're not invisible. So they're visible now, but I mean they're not invisible to the player. So as the GM, I can move the tokens however I want. As the player, I don't have any access to that layer. But when I select my token here, I can probably see at least this one. So let me check the line of sight. So on this thing here, I don't have it enabled. So I've seen this come up quite a bit during the forum. Someone says, well, the line of sight's not working. Well, make sure they're turned on. So enable lighting, enable line of sight, and if you want it as a GM, if you want the player preview, this is what the player sees. So I usually run it with the player preview so that I can kind of get a better idea that what they can see. But the default is to have this off, so it's kind of a hybrid view. It kind of shows the entire map, but it kind of also shows what they see. But I don't think it's defined enough a lot of times, so I just use it like that. And that way it's pretty much the same as the player view. And then if I need to see the whole map, I can use a shortcut, Control P. So if I have this selected, I can actually see the whole entire map when I need to. It's meant to be run the other way, where if you want to see what the player sees, so I'll turn that off. But if you want to see what the player sees, you Control P. You can do it that way, the opposite. I kind of like running it where this is actually on all the time. So I have an idea of what each player can see, but I do have to select their token. So if I've got 4 players, I have to select the token to see which player sees what. On this side, though, as a player, I can only see through the eyes of my actual character, but there is an option, if needed, where the GM can make it to where all of the players can see through each other. And there's a setting in here on the party sheet, or on the options, and it's party vision and movement, I believe, or token movement. I have to look. It basically allows a little bit more vision. Yeah, so token, party vision, and movement. Right now it's off, but if I turn that on and I had several tokens, you would be able to see as a player through the eyes of all the other tokens. So that's ideal if you have like a bard or someone that has like an animal companion and they need to control an NPC. That's the way to turn it on, the vanilla way. There's other options with extensions where you don't have to do that, but this essentially is where you set that. So basically that's the setup. This wouldn't take as long if I wasn't sitting here explaining it and trying to get into all the semantics of it. But also on here on the GM's map, you can see who has the map up or the image you're sharing. So if for some reason this character closes that and you're like, well, how can you see the map? So you can probably, the player can double click. They can double click on their token in the combat tracker, and then it will show that they're actually looking at the image. Some people will just park their token and then just use the combat tracker to do their battles. So they don't necessarily have to have a map if they're not going to move and such. They're going to stay put and just combat whoever gets close to them. They don't really necessarily have to have a map. As a matter of fact, for theater of the mind, that would be the way to do it. You don't even have to have a map. But anyway, so I'm going to lock the map so we can see it a little bit better. And this is the turn order, so I'm going to move this cursor up as the game master because Dorig's no longer first. So I just manually move this marker up to the top here. So this is Jairus. So Jairus is in the rear here. So he has to go through his players in order to get out of here. So actually I'm going to have him or her basically just hide in there. So let's see, this is a medium elf, the chain shirt. So I think Jairus is going to stay put, ready in action. So if anything comes through that archway, she's going to attack. I'll have to remember that as a game master. And then this is just the, if you had any pictures or art, you can add that. So Jairus is going to hold their turn. If nothing happens, they'll just lose their turn. So they're in the back here. So I want to make sure that that they're not going to have to cut through everyone and get in the way. So that's why I'm kind of skipping that. So he probably just picks up the spear and kind of readies in action. You could drag an effect to remember that they've readied in action. So if you had that, like if you set up something, you can do that in Fantasy Grounds. I don't want to get too deep because it kind of gets off topic, but you can set up an effect that essentially just says ready action, kind of like I have on this thing. Actually, I can even steal this one. So this is a ready action. I can let's just set the self though, so never mind. But I could put a note there that expires after the turn. So that way you can remember if they still have their ready action available to them. But I'm going to go ahead and just forward it. So if I click down, now it goes to Dorig. So as the player, Dorig's going to have to decide how they're going to want to do this. So he sees that they're being hostile, they have their weapons out, they're looking at him kind of menacingly. So what I'm going to do is say something like, hey, oh now, oh. And I'm going to put, let's see, I think I want to do, let's see, shield, spare the dying, thaumaturgy, guidance, don't need that. There's your candles. Let's see, protection, healing word, protection from good or evil, guiding bolt. Just for the sake of the combat tutorial, I don't want to get too crazy with this because I want you to see how some of this works. So I'll do guiding bolt. So this guy, this Reyna here, looks to be hostile. So I want to, as the player, I'm going to bring up, either bring up the map or you can do it in here in the combat tracker. So I'll do it that way without the map first. So I can take the die roll, which requires a saving throw, and drag and drop it onto Reyna. So on this combat tracker and on the spells list here, I can take this and drag and drop it to the NPC. And then down here it'll tell me if so that was a miss. So I was basically shot that spell off and missed. That sucked. So I want to, that was a first level spell. So we should be able to track those. I don't know why that's not, the spell counter isn't on here. Kind of weird. But this thing, let me see what we got here. Yeah, I don't know what happened. I think because this sheet is old. But this thing here doesn't need to be there. I think because I used the legacy and some stuff has changed since then, but nonetheless, I've used one of my first level spells. Here we go. I just didn't have it scrolled up very, very far. Yeah, so I need to check that off, and I'm going to actually move back. So as the player, if I want to move the token, I'm going to have to bring up the map, and I'm going to move back probably 25 feet. So I'll drag this over. There's 25 feet. And as the game master, I can approve it. So I'll go ahead and approve it. And then if I need to see what's going on, I can just go to view and zoom to fit. And I can see where he's going. All right, so once he's done, hopefully you'll remember to advance turn. So that's clicking this down arrow that I had shortcutted earlier. And that'll bring you to the next combat. And so that's Reyna. That's the one he tried to shoot with the spell. So I'm going to move her out, maybe like 10 feet, so that way she's not in the way. So I'm going to move her diagonally this way. So she doesn't have any light. So that, I don't know why that doesn't make any sense. Let me look at the stat block. It may just be a human reskinned to an elf. So that's this token here, or this one in my case. And it looks like she doesn't have dark vision, which is really strange. So on this particular stat block, I'm going to open this up. Yeah, so there's no dark vision on here. I don't know why. Maybe they don't have it. But nonetheless, she doesn't have any light. So that kind of stinks for her, right? So maybe she'd have to light up a torch. So kind of weird, but I don't know why these. I think what they did is they just took a guard and they reskinned it. They didn't actually use an elf. So that's what I suspected, because there's no senses on there for dark. I could add that, but that would be something you'd want to do before the game starts. But I'll go ahead and just grab a torch, just for the sake of it. So as the player, if I had a light source, and I assume that this is kind of more like an adventuring type, they probably have some kind of light source. So what I would do as a player is in the effects area over here on the right, you'll have this, and there's the different effects. So I can drag one of these to my entry here. So as an NPC and as the GM, I can drag that over to Reyna. So what I'll do is bring up the effects as the GM, and then drag the candle or the lantern or whatever. So I'll do a torch, put that on Reyna, and now she does have light. So she has light up to, the range of this. So she can't even hardly see Dorog. He's kind of in the dark. So that would probably imply a negative, like a disadvantage or a -2. So that's what I would say. So you can just barely make out Dorog's form. And so she's going to probably use one of her attacks. So let's see what we got here. So on the chance that you need to target someone, I'm going to go ahead and hold down the right control key, and I'm going to single click on Dorog. So there's Reyna, and then I'm going to basically hold down the control key and click on Dorog. So he's 40 feet away, but you got to remember he's obscured a little bit because he's kind of out of range. And if she moved closer, she could get a better view, but in this case, she doesn't want to risk it or get in anyone else's way. So what I want to do with her is take a look at her stat block. So if I double click on her token, it brings up the stat block. And it looks like she has a spear. So I think she's going to chuck her spear at him. I'll just kind of show you that. So it's already targeted. So I don't have to drag it to the target because it's already targeted. So if I double click on her spear attack, then I'll be able to basically execute the attack. Or if you go to the combat tracker, her offense here will show the spear. So there's an attack roll for melee and an attack roll for range. So I'm going to use the range. And then if you need to know how far away, you can click on this and it will tell you 20 to 60 feet. And he's only 40 feet out, so that works. So I'm going to take this attack roll and just double click on it because I've already have him targeted. If he wasn't targeted, then I would drag this +3 onto the token. So there's the die roll, and it will tell me I missed. So she threw that spear, which is her only weapon, Would make sense in game. I don't think I would do that at average charge, but I just wanted to show you that. When you're done with that attack, since you don't have any more melee attacks or range, I would hold down the control key and click again, and that removes the targeting. Or as the player, I think you can remove it, maybe not. Let me check. Yeah, so I think only the GM can do it from here. So as the GM, I can remove the targeting. I don't think the players have that option. Yeah, they don't. So to remove the target as a player, you do have to click on your target, hold the right control key, and then click on it and make sure you undo it. So when you make targets, you want to undo targets as necessary. That happens quite a bit where you'll have someone targeted from before and you didn't mean to as a player, and then it will apply the next attack or effect. So that's something you got to just get used to. So I'm going to hit the advanced. I'm going to let her know that this individual is coming out. So as the GM, I'm just going to take the token from here and drag it out. And they can move 30 feet, so move there. And if I want to emulate movement as an NPC, I can hold down the Alt key, and that will put the movement cursor out so you can kind of tell how far they've moved. And then that's going to be their movement, and I'll approve it. So he's moving over closer. And again, he doesn't have dark vision, so I'll just assume he has a torch. So from the effects here, I'm going to drag this torch to the token or to the combat tracker entry. So torch, there we go. Now he has light. So I think that was kind of annoying. I'm not sure if that was intended, but these elves should probably have dark vision. If you look it up, if you want to be a stickler about it and you're going to worry about it, you could go to your campaign or your library and look it up and see if they're supposed to have dark vision. Because I think what they did is they just took like a guard, like I said, and just kind of used the stat block for that and just called them elves. But I think they should have added that sense in there. That way they'd automatically have dark vision and you wouldn't have to use those torches. In most cases that would be the case, but I don't know if that was intended or a mistake or what. But for me that would be annoying. So as the game master, I improvised by adding, I added the actual information that I needed, like the torch, but I don't think that was supposed to be that way. So if I look at this, and it says that, let's see, development, if the elves returned, okay. So it says they're hiding, they're in this little alcove, so there's not even a fire or any light in here at all. So I don't even know how they would even see, if they could hear, but they wouldn't be able to necessarily see Dory coming in. So that right there would just set me off. I don't think I would like that as a game master, so I'd have to make those adjustments. And that's why it's kind of important to do a little bit of prep, make sure that stuff's working right, because there's nothing worse than, trying to run a paid game and realize that the NPCs aren't right or something on the map isn't working or whatever. So like I was saying earlier, when I had this map unlocked, the line of sight and the lighting and such weren't even active. So that already would have threw me off as a new GM. But I know to look for that. So that's one thing you want to check. And then the other thing was, these things are elves. Why don't they have, in their senses, why don't they have the dark vision? So if I uncheck that, I could probably add dark vision in this area. But I want to see what a stat block looks like in the monster manual. So if I go to books, and on the GM side, not the player side. So if I go to library, go to books, and let's check out the NPCs. see if there's any elves in here. Elf. Huh. Doesn't look like it. How weird. Why would there not be an elf in there? Doesn't make no sense. Okay, so what I'll do is, instead of looking there, I will go to the NPC, which will display everything that I have loaded, and then check out elf. Because there's got to be an example. What? There's no elf. That makes no sense at all. Nothing has the name elf in it, which is really strange. It could be a 2024 thing, but I don't know, guys. That's kind of weird. Yeah, so all the humanoids, you're telling me that they don't have an elf or some sort of... Let's try scout. Maybe that's an elf. Let's see. Nope, they don't have it either. So nonetheless, if you want them to have dark vision or something, you got to make sure that they actually have it in the census. So let's try that out. So this was Darren here, and this is something that you'll run across occasionally. Usually it's not an issue, but in this case, I'm already from the get-go, the lighting wasn't turned on, which is something I have to look for as a GM. And then the darn stat blocks are weird. So let me double click on this, and let's see. Does anything else have dark vision? I want to look at that. So if I go to the NPCs, let's look at a goblin. Well, I know they have it. They should. Goblin. Why are there no goblins? That makes no sense. How weird. Why would there not be a goblin? I have all the standard books. Do they not have something like that? That makes sense. Oh, because I'm searching in the player side. My bad. I got confused. Okay, goblin. I was going to say, what? Okay. So, goblin warrior. Yeah, so they have dark vision 60 feet. That's what this should be on the elf thing. I don't know why it isn't. But I would take this information. Dark vision 60 feet with a period after FT and then the semicolon. So for this, for Darren, for senses, I would do it just like it showed for the goblin. Dark vision 60 FT and then put the semicolon after it. Like that. Now he does have lighting. So let me remove the effect from the torch. Let's see what that looks like. So if you are a player, you can remove that if you added this torch light yourself, but the GM added it, so they can't turn that off. So that sucks. So as the GM, I have to go in there and do it because I added that effect. So if the player had the torch or the NPC already had lighting, I wouldn't even be going through this. So let me bring up the combat tracker, and here is the effect. So if I click on the effects button, here's the torch, so I can just delete that effect. But see, now they have now they have dark vision. That's why it's black and white. So I don't know if that's an oversight or what, but it's kind of weird because I would think that an elf would have dark vision, but maybe not. I don't know. But it seems weird that they're not having that kind of, and there's no elf NPC anywhere to be found, even with the player's handbook, the monster manual, and the DM's guide. That makes no sense. They should have a core NPC for each at least, but maybe that's something they're getting away from, and they're just making it like a regular humanoid, and then you have to add all the dressings to it. I don't know. But I don't remember if that's true of the legacy or not. But anyhow, so So that's basically how you would sort of kind of run this. And let's go down. Let's do a couple more things. So I want to take this, and as the GM, I have to pass the turn again because these are all NPCs. So Larian is going to move out of the alcove, and again, no light. So, well, actually, she does. No, she doesn't have light. So I'm going to hold down the Alt key and then move the token. So she moved up closer, and that's her turn. So it's still pretty dim because she doesn't have any light. So that is annoying. I don't know if that's just the way it is, or if that was a mistake or what, but that was kind of goofy. All right, so because this whole cavern is dark right now, so I don't know what's going on. But being that they have this little campsite, you'd think they have a little campfire or something. I don't know. But if it was me as the game master, I'd rather find this out now than during gameplay. And that's usually when you do find it. You don't normally have the luxury to go through all these things and to fix them before you play. But I'm kind of glad this happened because it shows what kinds of things that you'll have to adjust for when you're playing as a GM. You're going to have to do this occasionally. When you have a game in sessions, not everything's going to be perfect. So I don't know. I'll talk to Zacchaeus, the guy who did the conversion, or whoever did it, and ask them if that's an oversight or if that's just the way it is. Because I don't think that, I don't know, man. They took it right from the book. So it's got to be something to do with the rule set or something, because that doesn't make any sense to me. But I could be thinking about this more in Legacy and not so much in terms of the new rule set. So we'll see. Anyhow, so that's that turn, and then once she's moved, she's not going to throw her spear, but maybe I will. Let's see if she can do that. So we'll take the NPC stat block from the combat tracker, and this time I will use the map instead of just using the combat tracker. So I'll have her throw it like the other one did. We'll see. Yeah, she missed as well. So she lost her spear. So that was silly. If you did this during a game, both of those, unless they had more than one, both of those elves have lost their weapon. So they don't even have a weapon at that point. So as the game master, I would not have done that, but I just kind of wanted to show some of the way to do it, essentially. And now we're going to go up to Jairus, who's also, I'm just going to skip the turn and go to, that's the one that was holding back here. Maybe they're kind of scared or going to see out the outcome. So they lose their ready action. They're just going to announce it again. Basically, I'm just going to hold up and make sure, see how things play out. And now I'll go to Dorig. Like I said, this is the player character sheet. So far he's doing okay, but he wasted a spell slot. So let's go with Silence, Prayer, Healing. Yeah, it doesn't really have a lot of assaulted spells, but I'll have him move up. So Dorig, the player, is going to say, well, I'm going to move in and attack this guy. So he moved 10 feet, and as the GM, I can approve that movement. And now that he's in melee range, what I'm going to do is I'm going to activate the shield drop because I want to use two-handed. So he just stows away his shield, or he drops it, whatever you want to say in this case. And then I'm going to go up to the attacks, change this to a two-handed attack. So uncheck this, make sure, there we go. Now it's two-handed, now it's going to do 1d10. So if he does damage, it's going to do more damage. And then I'm just going to left-click and drag and drop it onto the token. Oops, wrong thing. So in this case, drag and drop the attack roll. to the target, and that was a miss. So we got a whole bunch of misses here. All right, so that's his turn, and then he would move or click either up here or in the shortcuts, the next actor. So that's kind of how this would play out. So you're just back and forth, advancing the tracker, going through the NPCs or the sheets, and then utilizing what special abilities they have. And I was getting a little bit confused between the player view and the GM view, but I wanted you to see that it is a different view for the player and the GM. So like this L1 is not showing up on the player map, and they can only see what they're looking at. Like if I right click and go to view, so if you get off on the map, you can just click on zoom to fit, and that will allow you to see better. And then on this side, on the GM side, let's just say that this player has the map all messed up or something. You right click and go to view, and then you can go to sync client view, and that will bring the map to what you're looking at and how you have it set. So if you have it a certain way as a GM and you want to bring that to focus for your players, you can right click, view, sync client view. So this is a GM option where you can actually move the map to where you want them to see what's going on. So that could be helpful occasionally. It might be annoying for the player if they have it set a certain way. So you may want to ask them, hey, I'm going to change the client view so you can see what I'm looking at here, you know, that sort of thing, instead of just doing it, because that might piss them off at some time. But anyways, so that's basically how that happens. So there are other options in Fantasy Grounds that I won't have a lot of time to cover, but the NPCs, I'm going to go to menu. I'm going to delete only the foes, which is an option that you have. And then if you come up to the options, there's some things you can do to change the way that Fantasy Grounds handles this. So if you're going to add NPCs to the combat tracker, it's going to default to group. So if I add that group of elves to the combat tracker, it's going to put them all on there with the same initiative. So if you want them to have different initiative rolls, you can either turn it off, in which case you'll have to manually do it through the menu or from their sheets, or you can click on, which means that they'll all have a unique combat tracker initiative order. So I'll just show you the group thing first, and then I want to bring up the map again. So on the map here, these NPCs are not on the map yet, but if I bring up the encounter, go to encounters, and add them to the map, now they're on the map. But they all have, let's see, did that work? Why did that happen that way? Let's see. It should have, they may not be all the same. Since they're not all the same NPC, because they have different names, that might be why it did that. So that basically is a way that you can basically ensure that these all have different initiatives. I don't think it worked because they're each named something else. So if it was like Goblin 1, Goblin 2, you know, like that, then they would all have the same initiative order. So this didn't matter in this case, but normally you'd have it on the on position, which would individually roll all the different types of creatures. If you had like boss and then like all the minions, the boss would have its own, and then all the minions would have have the same initiative based on this auto NPC initiative. So it has to do with when Fantasy Grounds adds it to the combat tracker. It's going to go by the title of the NPC, I guess. So that's something that kind of failed on me, but that's how that works. And then the other thing I might do is, let's see, what else do we have? Okay, so damage rolls, variable. So when the damage output on an attack roll, there's a number on the stat block that will show like an average of the damage that's on the character sheet. So what I'm saying is, on the stat block, you'll have this melee thing, and where it says hit colon 4, that's the average damage for the 1d6 plus 1. So what will happen is every time you make an attack roll and you hit or whatever, you apply damage, it would always, if you leave it on fixed, it will always do the same damage no matter what. If you put on variable, then it's going to roll. So that's useful at high levels and low levels when you're trying to control how many hits it takes to take someone down. So in this case, if you know that this Dorg has 35 hit points and you divide that by 4, you know, how many times, you're going to get like 8 times basically before he, 8 or 9 times before he goes down. So that way you can kind of track it that way instead of having this wide swing of numbers. So I guess that would work well with lower level players. You kind of have a more control over the damage range. But I don't see people using that very often, but that is kind of cool. Hit points. So I have it set to random. So when you add the NPCs, they'll have a random amount of hit points instead of all having the same. So a lot of times, like if you have goblins or something like that, when you add them, they'll all have the same initiative and the same amount of hit points. And there's people that, you know, that like to know those numbers ahead of time, so they've memorized half the monster manual. So if you change that to random, when they're added to the combat tracker, they'll all have a little bit of variation on their hit points. So instead of a static number, which is this hit point number, it rolls and it will give the range, and it will add that temporarily to the combat tracker. It doesn't change the actual NPC stat block, it changes the combat tracker copy. So whenever you add an NPC, that's a copy of the original record. It's not the actual record itself. And that holds true with artwork and everything else. So that's basically some of the things I change. And then one other thing is this diagonal distance. So if you care about that, the default, I don't know, that's just 1 for 1. But if you leave it on, let's see, let's go with default. So on the default, when the player makes their move, see on raw, it keeps track of every little movement. If you go to default, there's 20. It doesn't really count diagonal movement. So there's 30 feet right there. But if you change that to 1.5 times, they've actually moved 40 feet. So when you move diagonally, it keeps track of that, you know, with Pythagorean's theorem there. So this is the long side. If you move in an L shape, that's a basic movement. But if you move diagonally, that's 1.5 times. So depends on what your needs are here. So I'm going to go ahead and call it a day. But if you guys are wanting to check out Fantasy Grounds, or you want to join our community, we have the Fantasy Grounds Academy Discord. We're not the actual official Fantasy Grounds. We're just kind of like a fan club community type thing. But we've been rocking for about 8 years. We're having our Founders Day event in a couple weeks. So if you guys want to hang out, play, and check out some stuff at Fantasy Grounds, we're running that soon in a couple weeks. So hopefully you guys enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I'll see you around next time. Bye-bye.